Corsair, Apple Floppy Days, Commodore, Tandy Floppy Days, Atari, TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we played, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, ST Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we played, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3.
Introducing the Apple IIc.
Atari 1040 ST.
Commodore 64.
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari.
At his Radio Shack Color Computer 3.
Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
For computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
A wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20.
Hello and welcome to episode 136 of the Floppy Days Podcast. I'm Randy Kindig, the host of the show, and I'll be your guide to a journey back to the year 1982, when a very interesting low-cost machine entered the market in Great Britain. This is the final episode on the Grundy New Brain, not a very well-known machine, particularly here in the US, where very few have even heard of it, let alone owned one. If you want to know more, I've recently published interviews with John Grant, Steve O'Hara-Smith, and Gerald McMullon concerning their involvement with the New Brain back in the day. I also, in the most recent episode, discussed tech specs around the machine with my co-host. Regarding that, in that last episode, to help me talk about the machine, I enlisted Chris Despoinidis to co-host this episode. Chris manages the New Brain emulator site from his home in Greece. Even though Chris created one of the premier New Brain emulators in existence, and that was the primary focus of his website initially, his site has become one of the best places, along with Gerald McMullon's website, to get any and all New Brain information, which quite honestly is sparse. The focus of this last episode detailing the machine, Chris and I will cover things like peripherals, websites, books and magazines, software, using the machine, emulators, and all of the topics that have become the standard for machine coverage on Floppy Days. This episode will complete all the details we know on the New Brain, with the intent to impart every bit of information to you that I could find about this little known machine. Before we do that, I will talk about upcoming shows. I do want to remind you to encourage the small businesses that exist which support our vintage computer hobby, such as 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts, which is a great place to get vintage computer items such as video cables, power supplies, cartridges, upgrades, and more for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms. Corey's been a friend of the show for some time, and I really appreciate his support of the podcast. Check out his site. Another site that is awesome is arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. Greg has a wide variety of hard-to-find items for a large number of platforms. This is another site that I do and have done a lot of shopping at. If anything shows out of stock, just ping Greg and he can check whether he has it or can get more of the item for you. I also want to mention those listeners who appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com. I'm not going to run through the names, but know that I really appreciate you guys and it helps offset the cost of running the podcast. Soon, I intend to provide additional benefits for those of you that see fit to help support the vintage computer hobby that I spend way too much time on. Now, on with the show.
Hello, I'm Chris Despoinidis. I'm the creator of New Brain Emulator and the administrator of New Brain site, and you're listening to the Floppy Days Podcast.
Okay, now for new acquisitions and what I've been up to. So this month, rather than talking about new acquisitions, I'm going to cover what I've been up to, as there was a big show this month being February of 2024, in Orange, California, that being VCF Southern California. To help me talk about the show, as he was also an attendee, I'm going to have Mr. Paul Nermanen, and we're going to discuss everything that we took away from that show, our thoughts and impressions of that show. It was a great show, by the way. And after we got talking, it took over 2 hours, so I'm actually going to publish a separate episode where I talk with Paul and we cover the show. So this month, that will be the What I've Been Up To section. Again, that will be a separate podcast that you will see in the Floppy Days feed.
My name is Gerald McMullon. I worked at Grundy Business Systems from 1982 to 1983. I worked on the software distributed with the disk controller, and the software on the floppy disk was what I gathered and put together. I developed some other software and supported people who were writing software to prove that it would run on the New Brain and test that out. After the collapse of Grundy Business Systems, I set up a news group, ran a company to support customers who are looking for peripherals and support for their new brains. And you're listening to the Floppy Days Podcast.
All right. So now let's talk about upcoming vintage computer shows. So again, we're still very early in the year, so there are a ton of shows that have been announced for the remainder of 2024. I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly, but I really hope you guys are getting something out of this and that it encourages people to go to these shows, because these shows really are great. I just came back from the VCF SoCal in Orange, California, and it was great. And I'm so glad that I went and saw so many people there. It's a great time to see other people that maybe you only communicate with via social media. And it's also a great way to see so many of these vintage computers in their natural habitat. So the first one I want to mention is the Interim Computer Festival Spring, March 23rd and 24th at IntraSpace in Seattle, Washington. Next is the Midwest Gaming Classic at the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That is April 5th through the 7th. April's a busy month. The very next weekend is VCF East, April 12th through the 14th in Wall, New Jersey. And that same weekend is the Indie Classic Computer and Video Game Expo, April 13th through the 14th at the Crown Plaza Airport Hotel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Disclaimer, I am an organizer, one of the organizers of that show, and I'm hoping that many of you can come. Also that same weekend is the Commodore Los Angeles Super Show, April 13th through the 14th at the Burbank VFW Hall in Burbank, California. Also in April, but this time over on another continent, is VCF Europa, April 27th through the 28th in Munich, Germany. In May, the 32nd annual Last Chicago Cocoa Fest, May 4th through the 5th at the Holiday Inn and Suites Chicago, Carol Stream in Wheaton, Illinois. June 14th through the 16th is VCF Southwest at the Davidson Grundy Alumni Center at the University of Texas, Dallas. same weekend, in Hurricane, West Virginia, is the BoatFest Retro Computer Expo, June 14th through the 16th. Also in June, Pacific Commodore Expo Northwest version 4, June 22nd through the 23rd, at the Old Rainier Brewery Intraspace in Seattle, Washington. And that next weekend, June 29th through the 30th, is the Kickstart Amiga UK Expo in Nottingham, UK. In July, there's the Southern Fried Gaming Expo and VCF Southeast. It's a combined show, July 19th through the 21st in Atlanta, Georgia. Then we move into September, and we have VCF Midwest, September 7th through the 8th. So the date has been announced. The new venue is still to be determined as of this recording. It will be at a new location. We don't know where yet, but it will be in the Chicagoland area. Also in September, September 27th through the 29th, is the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. September 27th through the 29th, so the same weekend, is Tandy Assembly at the Courtyard by Marriott in Springfield, Ohio. October 26th will be Chicago TI International World Fair at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. And that's all I have listed for the remainder of 2024, at least to this point. And if you know of any others, please, as always, let me know about it and I will get it on the list.
My name is Steve O'Hara Smith. I worked on the Grundy New Brain back in the days when it was the Newbury Labs New Brain, right at the beginning in '79. And you're listening to the Floppy Days Podcast, and it's been great talking to you.
Okay, and now I'm continuing the discussion along with Chris Despoinidis about the Grundy New Brain. And again, you are just great at segues, I tell you, because our next section is about peripherals. And, what you just talked about just now ties right into the discussion that we want to have here. So there were a lot of peripherals, at least that were shown in brochures about this machine. I don't know how many of them were actually made or sold, but there were actually, it appears, there were New Brain branded monitors and printers.
You could use it didn't have to be from Grundy or something like that. You could use any type of printer at that time.
Sure.
As monitors as well. The expansion interface module that gave you extra memory, CPM, and drives, that was the one that sell a lot. The network interface was used mainly, as I said before, from that company. And there were several other peripherals like ROM boxes. You could have programs in a ROM and attach it at the expansion interface on the back of the New Brain, and you could load it from there instead of the tape. I think the speed was, of course, very much. It was very fast to load from ROM than from the tapes, and there was also, I think, sound interface that someone made and attached, I think, on the printer port, and that played some beats. I don't think that it went too far from there. I think the peripherals were a bit too late for this machine, and that is one of the reasons the machine was not as successful as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the expansion unit, and I think that's an important thing to really discuss in detail here, because that was a the critical part of the whole design of this thing. They really designed the system to be modular. So you had the main unit referred to as the processor module. You know, you could buy that and use that just by itself if you wanted to, but they had all these expansion modules that you could get as well. And as I understand it, all these expansion modules would connect off the expansion port on the back, and then they would have an expansion on them, and you could just build the thing. I guess it would be vertically. Well, not vertically, but
like a tower, one over the other.
Yeah, flat, but vertically, right? And you could take it and have a really long system if you had a bunch of these expansion modules.
You could put like a tower, one over the other, except for the main. The main was in front of you, like the keyboard we have today on our PC, and the rest of them was the one over the other, the main, the expansion module, or any other module. It has also, what we didn't say, it was portable also. I don't know if you know that. They had a battery, and it was used by a chemist, pharmacist company. They gave it to their employees, and they went to the pharmacist and get some orders there. I think something like that. And it was used without mains power. It was with a battery module there. And they were using, of course, the VFD display.
So I know you've mentioned a lot of these already, but I just wanted to summarize all these different modules that were actually available for the machine, because I just find it so interesting. And it shows the power you could get out of it if you wanted to spend the money for all the other pieces. But there was as I understand, there was a ROM buffer expansion module, and that was, let's see, had memory paging circuitry, enabling up to 4 megabytes of memory to be addressed. This would be ROM memory to be addressed, right?
ROM, and you choose which one you want
ROM or RAM?
Put in. Yes, they have some chips were ROM and some were RAM to expand your own.
But you could actually put ROM modules then inside this, right? You could buy ROMs that you could put inside?
The chips, the IC.
Yeah, right. It also had parallel input and output ports. It had analog ports for joystick controls and laboratory apparatus. 2 fully autonomous multi-speed V24 ports. I'm not sure what those are.
V24, I think that's the serial.
Okay. Some of the you mentioned some of the software you could get, like other languages. Did they actually come with ROMs that you would then install in this?
I put it on tape or on discs for the CPM system. On tapes, I had Pascal, and after loading Pascal, you didn't have much RAM available to make a serious program.
Yeah.
So it was a problem there for the 32 kilobytes. I think it was about 24, 28 kilobytes was the Pascal program. And you didn't have much RAM to play around or make something serious about with that language. But with CPM, I think it was much better. I think it has the word processor as the CPM had. WordStar, I think. I think that was the one.
Well, in the brochure it said, I'm trying to understand what this is saying, for that ROM buffer expansion module, it says read-only memory expansion space for software such as the assembler package, the Kamal language, and statistics and text processor.
Yeah, they have several programs, but they are very specific. There are other expansion modules that you could write your own programs on the ICs and then put them on the ROM modules. I think that was done by not the main company, but other companies.
Okay. There was also the disk memory module that would support 5.25-inch floppy drives that store anywhere from 200K to 800K, and Winchester disk drives for megabytes of storage.
This one you could install it without the expansion interface module. You could have the drives with a simple New Brain computer. And you could have a CPM there too, to use the drive, with only 32 kilobytes of RAM. It was a special version of the CPM, but it was done and it is working. You could see that in the emulator. Just to put drives and the New Brain without the expansion module and have a CPM.
Then there's the battery backup module that you mentioned, which used rechargeable batteries and provided a fully charged battery life of about an hour. It says an hour and a quarter. So, I guess that would make it somewhat portable, although just getting an hour out of it is not very long.
And without the display, with the VHD display, that's the 1 hour that says there. It's
okay. Okay. And then it says there was also a video text module that would allow communications between the New Brain and teletext, Prestel, or other video text services. Did you guys have those other? Did you have teletext? No. Or okay.
I haven't seen that, and I don't know if it existed before.
Okay.
I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah, again, this was in their brochure. That doesn't mean they made them or that they ever sold very many of them, but it was interesting.
UK, they could use it there.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it for that section. Wanted to briefly talk about what it was like to actually pull the machine out of the box and use it for those that actually, bought one. So most of the pictures that I've seen show a sort of a beige or off-white case with dark brown keys. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's it. There were no other colors.
There were no other colors? Because I've seen other pictures that made it look as though there were other colors available as well. And I never...
No?
Okay. Maybe they were yellowed. You know how the cases get yellowed over time. Maybe those other pictures were yellowed and just look different.
Well, I have mine over here. It's yellow with brown.
Okay.
That's the short.
Okay. So hooking up, all you really needed is the power supply and the TV connector, a TV or monitor, and the New Brain itself. It came with all those things in the box.
Yes, that's it. The box also the tape cables, not the tape. You can buy that your own tape. And there was one cable for the tape, and that's it. Nothing else. No reset button. If you wanted to reboot your machine, you should take the mains plug out and put it back in.
Well, I don't think any of the UK machines had on-off switches or did it have an on-off switch on it?
Oh no, but the reset button they have. Spectrum had the reset button. You could press it and restart the computer if it hangs.
Did the new brain actually have an on switch, or did you just...
No. Put it on the mains plug and it started to boot up.
Okay.
That's it.
It's after you turned it on, it says about 10 seconds. It did seem to take a little while. I know when I was using your emulator, it took a little bit of time, but then it would come back up, and on the boot screen it would say New Brain Basic and Ready with a flashing cursor.
Yes, that's it. It does some memory check. That's why it takes so long. It writes some bytes on each one of the RAM memory, 32 kilobytes of that. And if something is wrong, let's say at 20K, then it stops and you have a maximum 20K RAM. If the 20K RAM is somehow damaged, that's how much you have. So it does some testing for the memory, and that's why it takes so long.
So once it booted up, now if you want to interact with the machine, it says the screen display initially consists of 24 lines of 40 characters. So that was the default, I guess. But the display editor could hold a page between 1 and 255 lines of 40 or 80 characters. I guess this is where you're talking about it was really flexible in that regard.
At 255 lines is the maximum. Of course, you only see 25 lines on the screen, but you could go up and down like a buffer, and you see a window of the total buffer on the screen. That was very useful.
That is nice.
Like that. It was good. You could also have multiple screens, not only one. You could have 2, 3, as long as 255 screens, different screens. That was the maximum. But all depends on the RAM. And the video RAM is the low 16K of the 32. So you have the problem of the RAM. You couldn't have 255 screens.
You're saying for each screen, you could have 255 pages, but you could also have up to 255 screens that each had their own set of pages?
Yes.
Wow.
Just lines, not page. You could have 255 lines with 255 screens.
Okay. 255 lines. Right, okay.
But the memory was not enough, so you couldn't have so much, but you could have 2, 3, or 4 with 40 lines each.
Yeah.
You could paint something on one screen, you could write something else on the other screen.
Nice.
Swap it, the swap was instant. You could see the one screen, and then in a millisecond you could see the next screen. So you could show a screen on the user, and you could write the screen the user didn't see at that time. And when you finish writing on the second screen, like double buffering, something like that. You could do something like that on this machine.
That is very nice. It's too bad it didn't support multiple monitors, and you could have. One screen on one and one screen on the other. That would be even more cool.
That we see a lot of years after that.
Yeah, right. So at that point, once you were in there, you could load up software. If you just had a cassette recorder, you could put the tape in there, type load, and it would and then turn on your press play on the cassette recorder. It would search through, find a program, tell you what the name is that it found, and then it would load it. Is that about right?
Yes. If you write next to the load the name of the program, then it will search for that in the whole tape. That means it will try to find it. It would not load the first program that comes along. It will compare with the name of the program with the name you gave it. If you don't put the name, then the first program will load to run.
Okay. All right. Very cool.
And I can say another thing about the loading process of the new brain. The tape used a REM. It has 3 cables on your tape, and one of the 3 cables was used to control the motors of the tape. So the tape, while it was loading, the computer would stop the tape, give that command, because, as I said, when you load the program to the new brain, the commands in BASIC, BASIC was pre-compiled, so it would have to compile it, and at that time the tape would stop, the new brain would compile as much as it loaded, and then it would load the next part, and the next part, and the next part until it loads the whole program. That would be 10, maybe 20 times if it was a big program, a 16 kilobyte base. That's also something that not many computers of that time had, to stop the tape.
Right. So you just kind of had to let it go and didn't worry about if it's... How did you know when it was done?
It just saw a cursor on the screen that was just blinking on off. And most of the time you would play load, press the play on tape, and you go to the kitchen and eat something, and then came back and save it load.
Right. So the cursor was gone while it was loading, but when it was done loading, then the cursor would be back and you know it was done. Is that right?
Yes, in the time the screen was also not refreshing, complete refreshing, because it was loading at the time and needed the speed. So as the screen was painting, it would stop and start from the beginning. So you would see some effect there, and you know that it's loading. Like the spectrum was done something like that for the border around the screen, and the new brain was done on the whole screen.
I noticed that when I was playing with your emulator, and I loaded a virtual cassette in it, that it did that, and I didn't know why it did that, but I did notice that. Yeah.
That's the reason.
Okay. That's using a new brain, if you were lucky enough to have one, or that some of that information is useful even if you're just using the emulator, right? Because all the machines are different, and understanding how to use it is a challenge sometimes if you use a lot of different machines. So let's move on to user groups and newsletters. So I did find some information about users groups and their associated newsletters. I did not find that there were any magazines that were ever created specifically for the new brain, something that you would call a magazine. But all or most of the user groups that existed had their own newsletter. And I noticed on your site you have a lot of those newsletters available for people to download and read. But some of the newsletters or user groups were like there was a Paris Micro Club.
We didn't have any knowledge of those groups in Greece.
Oh, yeah?
There was no internet back then. So
yeah.
We're just an island, let's say. We have some friends who had a new brain, and we exchanged views. And we didn't have even any other way to know about those user groups. And I found out about those groups after I made the new brain emulator and came across those in Holland, in Dutch, Netherlands. it's called.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. France, I think it was the Dutch one, and in England, of course.
Yep. Yeah, the Dutch and British ones obviously were the most popular because it was created in England and ended up being bought by a Dutch company. So there were groups available there. There was a Dutch group called NB exclamation.
They changed their site recently, some years ago. They had a site which was only for the New Brain. Now it's more like a retro site, and the New Brain is in there. And they meet, I think, twice or 2 or 3 times a year. They have a meeting in the Netherlands.
Is that the one that has the newsletter called New Brain Online?
Yes, that's one.
Yeah, I read just recently. I found that site and I was reading about it. It doesn't appear that they've had any New Brain specific meetings since about 2017, as far as I can find. But they have regular, just general group meetings.
Yes.
And some of those people have New Brains, that attend those meetings.
This happened after 2017, as you said. Before there were only New Brain meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Now
they
have very much things.
In England, there was the New Brain user group, the NBUG, that I understand was run by Gerald McMullon.
Yes, the company in the UK, and she made a lot of programs and some peripherals also.
Right, and they had a good newsletter as well associated with that. I do talk with Gerald. Actually, the next podcast that I produce has an interview with Gerald. So he was kind enough to talk about his days with the New Brain.
He has a lot of knowledge. He was inside the company, I think.
Yeah. And he was very involved with supporting it even after it was no longer being made. There was another newsletter called OpenStream, which is available on your site as well.
Yes, I don't know who write those. I just found the magazines and I put them on my site.
One issue with some of these newsletters, as you come across them, is that they're in Dutch because they were, created by a group in the Netherlands. So you've got to translate them if you want to read, some of these newsletters.
Yes, the online ones, they are also already translated. They are in Dutch and in English. The other ones, I think they are not. So if you want, you must type it on Google Translate and see what it says.
Right. Okay, that's it from, I think, from a user group and newsletter perspective. Books and manuals, I could not find a lot in that regard. I did a lot of searching. There were several books and manuals actually put out by Grundy Business Systems, like their handbook and their beginner's guide, a tech specs book. They had one called the New Brain System, which is sort of a brochure. But other than that, other books created by third parties, I couldn't find much. I did find one called Getting More from Your New Brain by Andrew Pepper and Michelle Clark. That seemed to be a pretty good and pretty thorough book. And
yes.
Is that
what I
yeah, and all of these are available. All of these are available on your site. They also are at archive.org. But are there other ones out there that you've run across?
I wouldn't know. We didn't have them when we needed them in the 80s.
Right.
It didn't know it even existed back then. So whatever I find, I put it on my site.
Okay. Whatever you found. Do you have very many of these books in your, like actual hard copy of these books in your library?
The one I have is the technical specification manual. That's the one I use. It has some hardware specific stuff that I am using for my emulator. So I had that book back in the 80s too. Not the book itself, but the photocopy of the book. It was a little bit difficult to find the book back then. So if someone has that book, we just photocopied it.
Yeah, actually getting a hard copy of like the book Getting More from Your New Brain, which I'd love to own and have in my collection, they're impossible to find. And if you do find them, they go for a lot of money.
It was difficult to buy them in Greece back then. They were not sold in the shops.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you want something like that, if you knew that something was existed back then, you should try to find it in some other country, like import it from England or something like that.
Right. Right. And again, I looked on the UK eBay, and you can find the book Getting More from Your New Brain, but you're going to spend a lot of money for it, for a book anyway.
It's a rare book.
Yeah, because they must be rare. They must be pretty rare. Software-wise, so as we've talked about, business use was really proportionally high for this machine due to many features of the machine, but also due to the fact that you had CPM software that you could run on the Grundy New Brain. And even beyond CPM, of course, with CPM, that gave you access to a lot of different software. But even outside of CPM, there were some third-party software houses that provided software for the New Brain. HiSoft, for instance, produced New Brain versions of their Pascal compiler and editor.
Yes, mainly languages.
Languages, yeah. Seemed like there were a fair number of languages, and then, the typical productivity software that you would expect, for a business machine. Like word processors and databases and, and that sort of thing. It didn't seem as though there was a lot of games ever really developed for the machine because it was more business oriented. Did you own a lot of games for it?
A lot. There were not a lot of games. So whatever we could find, we collected them. Not so much, so many games. We created a lot of games for our own games. That was the era. People should know how to program a computer in order to use it.
Right,
something
exactly.
Like that these days, people just know how to use them, but know how the computers are being programmed.
Exactly. They don't really know how they work. They don't really know how to program them in many cases. They just use them. So it was definitely different in those days.
Yes, it was, let's say, the start of an era.
Okay, let's move into ads. So I found a couple of ads that were available in some of the mainstream magazines of the time. I think the ad, just as we've talked about, the machine was really business focused, so the ads were really along those lines. One of them that I found here says, "So it can win you many more hearts and minds. It's a uniquely low-cost way to using all the CPM software. So this particular ad was touting the fact that you could run CPM on the machine, which gave you access to a pretty large library of software that you could run
CPM
on.
Just in the 80s, not a lot of machines could run CPM.
Right.
Those who could cost a lot of money. So for you to have something like New Brain cost was about 200 pounds, I think, in England. So it was quite cheap if you could run all the CPM programs. I think Angola, the state in Africa, was using officially in their government. They had New Brain, not an IBM mainframe. They were using New Brains to do their job.
Mm-hmm. And then the other ad from Personal Computer World basically said, no other micro has this much power in this much size for this much money. Now, of course, if you really wanted to run the most powerful software or run CPM, you had to buy more than just the processor module, right? Just more than the computer itself. You probably wanted the disk drive and yeah. But still, even then, even adding a disk module and the disk drives, it was cheaper than a lot of machines at the time that would allow you to run CPM.
The CPM machine was starting about £1,000 in India at that time, so you could buy some extra modules and still be cheaper.
Yeah. All right. Next topic is modern upgrades. Now, I always love to talk about what modern upgrades are available. Could not find much of anything as far as modern upgrades available for the New Brain, other than something called the SD box, which appears to be a virtual drive for the New Brain, SD card based. I actually found a video on YouTube about it, and then on your site you have a circuit diagram for it as well. I guess if someone wants to make their own.
Yes, that's made from the Dutch user group, some guy there, and it works very well, as I can see. It is a very clever idea because nowadays you can put on an SD card all the New Brain software
ever made,
and still have a lot of room left.
Yeah.
And it's a lot faster to load the programs from the SD card than from tapes.
Do you own one of these? Did you ever make one yourself, or?
I made a module for my hardware emulator. As I said, I use a USB, not an SD card, a USB module, and I use that. For my New Brain, I made an SD card module based on Arduino.
Oh, okay.
And use the serial port. I connect it to the serial port, and it has a small LCD screen. And you can choose which program you want to load. You have some buttons. I made something like that. It was quite easy to do.
Is that something that's on GitHub that someone can access and make their own, or?
That was one of my first ones. I don't think it's on the GitHub or anywhere else. Probably lost the software that runs on the Arduino.
Okay.
But if someone is interested, I could either make one, a new one, or maybe I would find it if I search enough my disks.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other modern upgrades that you're aware of that were ever made for this machine?
No, I don't think someone would put an effort on that to make something for an old machine like that. you should have one at first, and then you would really need something. That module that we talked about, the SD card, it's something you need if you have one. Mm-hmm. It's a very good one. But what else can we make? I don't think.
I was thinking about some of the expansion modules. Those might be hard to find. No one's ever tried to remake those or anything like that.
I think someone is trying to, that's not an expansion of course, but is trying to change the RAM board that's inside the new brain to just rip that apart and put another one inside with a modern static RAM instead of the DRAMs that lie there. Because many of those RAMs are easily destroyed over time. So it would be a nice thing to have, to change the RAM of the system.
It's just to change the RAM. It's not to upgrade the RAM in any way.
If you change it, maybe someone will make an upgrade also. But the first thing is to change the RAMs. The RAM chips are very old. Mm-hmm. And they are about 12. 16 of them inside. Yeah. And you can just have the same amount of RAM with one chip, one static RAM nowadays.
And you say someone is working on that, so it's not something that's been...
I got something on GitHub. I'm just following him to know when he will manage it. Maybe I will try to make one for myself.
Gotcha. Okay. The next topic is emulation. So we talked a little bit about it up front because you developed an emulator. I actually went out and looked at MAME just even yesterday. I couldn't find any information about a New Brain emulator available through MAME or MES. But, if you say there is one, there must be, and I just couldn't find it.
Yes, there is one for the last 2 or 3 years, I think. The problem was for them, because they tried to make an emulator some years ago, but there were no ROMs for the COP coprocessor.
Okay, yeah.
So some guys asked me if I could just get the ROM from the chip. And I used an Arduino Omega, and I managed to get the ROM of this chip. And I made it public for anyone to use it. So I think they managed to emulate this. The COP, I think they already knew how to emulate. They just needed the ROM that the COP was using. So I think now it's working okay. I have some years to look into that, but I think it was working.
But the emulator you developed, which, as I understand it, looks like it's version 3 beta 4 is the latest version. Is that right?
Yes, that was the latest. And I have some new fixes that I haven't put on the site yet.
Oh, okay. It seems to be very good. I did download it. It's Windows only, and I'm a Mac user, but I did get a Windows machine, and I installed it over there, and I played with it a little bit, and it seems very nice. Can you talk about the emulator a little bit? What features it has? Because it's really got a lot of powerful features.
Well, I started with a simple emulation of the main machine. That's 32 kilobytes and stuff. And I tried to emulate the full features of the machine, which I did. And then I tried to emulate the expansion interface module, the drives, and any other hardware I could find. I did some work there. The most difficult one was the CPM and the drives. and that was very difficult because I didn't have any knowledge of the CPM system. I didn't use it in the 80s. Because as I said, machines that have it was very expensive back then. And then we have the PCs with the DOS and Windows, so I skipped that part, and I haven't had the knowledge for the CPM. So I have to learn it all from the start, how at the very low level, and I mean the discs, how it was made, and that took me some time. But I think the guys at the Dutch user group sent me an expansion interface module with the drive, with the system disks, and that helped a lot. I wouldn't have the ability to do the emulation of the expansion interface module without that hardware, and that helped a lot. I think it's a pretty good emulator, easy to use. Of course,
Yeah.
That's what the users to say.
Yeah. No, I thought it was great. I didn't know how to use a Grundy New Brain, right? So it took me a little bit to understand, and it has nothing to do with your emulator, but just to understand how to use the machine itself. And the first thing I did was try loading in some tape software, and you do provide, on your site, you've got quite a few tape images that are available to load into the emulator. So I was trying to load in Space Invaders off of tape. The only problem I ran into with Space Invaders is that the first thing it does is it comes up and asks you for a drive letter or something. I wasn't sure what it was asking or what it wanted, and
versions, one for the drives and the disk drives, and one for the tape. I don't know which one you loaded up.
It was a tape image. It was a tape image that I loaded, but then the first prompt it gives you when you run it, once you've loaded it in, is it appears it's asking for some sort of drive letter.
I don't remember something like that, but you say so. I have a lot of years to check that.
Anyway, the emulator seems great.
Install the emulator. There are a lot of tapes that comes along with it. You don't have to download anything. It has some discs and things and some tapes I put inside.
Yes, that's true. And you've got a nice help file in there as well, so that it kind of walks you through how to load software and that sort of thing. So I think you've done a really great job with that, and it's a good way to play with a machine that is really hard to get your hands on today.
It is very difficult for someone that hasn't seen the machine or use it to be able to use it, just like we had the same problem in the 80s. When we took the machine, we should open the manual and start reading and learn basic and stuff. It's not the Windows, you put your hand on the mouse and just start clicking around and see how stuff works. You should know what you're doing there. So the load is the most easy command to use, but there are others, of course, if you want to fully see what the machine can do. It has a demo if you are interested in the disk. In one of the disks, you have a full demo of the machine. It shows you all the specifications of the machine. I think I made a YouTube on that. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Maybe you could find there something.
Okay.
If you want to see.
Yep. All right. Buying one today. So, as we've said many times, it was very, very rare. So it is really hard to find one. I did some searching. It's even rare. It's especially rare here in the U.S., but it's even rare even if you go to the UK eBay and try to find one. I just looked just yesterday. There were two available. One was from Greece for $999 buy it now. And that was just, I think that was just the machine. And then there was another one from the Netherlands that was €995, which is more like about $1,100 US.
It's too expensive, I think.
Yeah. And then there was one in the UK that was untested, did not have the power supply. It was just the machine, and it was 449 pounds.
It's too expensive. I think the next best thing is to have the emulator, and if you want to have the real machine, there is I don't remember how it's a hardware emulator that uses an FPGA chip to emulate various machines. It does not emulate the new brain yet, but it's cost about for $500. But you have not just one machine. You have any machine of the 80s. It is a Spectrum emulator. It is a Commodore emulator. It's any emulator you know, even consoles. It emulates everything. I don't know.
Is that the MIST, or is that a different?
That's it, the MIST. So if someone transfers the new brain ROMs into MIST, you could buy that and use all the software, just like the software emulator.
Yeah. I mean, if you have one, you could certainly. It would be nice that you could do that, but it's probably easier just to run your emulator, and and do it that way.
Now, if you want the feeling of the machine, the keys and all the other stuff, then you should buy an old one, a real new brain. But as you said, even $400 is too much, I think, for just that. You could go to an exhibition, as we said in the start of our conversation, somewhere that exhibits this machine, and you could see how it feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be great to see one live. See a real one. I'd love to go to a show and actually be able to see one. But I've never seen one at a show at least here in the U.S. and I've been to quite a few shows.
We could make a trip in Europe.
There we go. That's what I need. That's what I need to do. I need to go to a show over in the UK or somewhere. Yeah. All right. Next topic is community. So I could not find any forums or any, anything anywhere that was specific to the new brain itself. I just could not find any. I know you have a forum on your site.
Yes, but now, as you can see, it's a new site, the one that currently is on the internet is the new one, and it doesn't have so much information yet.
Yeah.
The old one, I couldn't transfer the forum from the old one to the new one. It was incompatible, so I just left it there. But anyone who wants to ask anything or start a conversation would be done on the site.
Okay. Now, beyond that, people could go to Stardot. Seems like a good place. There's some Grundy conversation I found on stardot.org. There's also here in the U.S. Atari Age is again it's called Atari Age, but it covers pretty much all machines. And there's some discussion there about the Grundy New Brain. So there are a few places you can go to at least get some new brain discussion or help, but just really nothing specific to the new brain.
Yes, it's not so many people that are interested in the new brain nowadays. So
Yep.
it's something to be expected, not to have so much information for this machine.
And then as far as current websites or videos, if you want to go view some videos about the new brain, again, there's not a lot out there, but there are a few places you can go. Your site seemed to by far have the most information that I could find anywhere about the machine. And I'm sure you've done a lot of work over time, trying to find everything that you could to put on your site. So that would be the first place I'd recommend people go, would be to your site.
I had a lot of help from Colin. Colin was a new brain enthusiast. He sent me some CDs with a lot of information. So I used that info a lot in my site. I made them public, so anyone can have access to them. So, as I said, in Greece there were not so much information here. That was all came from England and the Dutch user group. A lot of stuff from there.
Okay. I did find information at a site called binarydinosaurs.co.uk. There's there's an old site called newbrain.hcc.nl that you can only get to. It's archived because it's no longer, live. So you have to go to archive.org, use the Wayback Machine, and you can go and actually see information that way.
That was the Dutch user group, the site they had before the new one.
Yep. I did find an article on the new brain in Popular Computing Weekly that I've got a link to that you can read. There is one site, 8bit-homecomputermuseum.at, that has some repair information that pretty thorough and good. Have you used that?
Not yet, but I looked at what they did.
Yeah.
There are some information on YouTube if you try to repair anything, how to change the capacitors. That's the main problem on every new brain.
There was a series of videos on fixing the new brain on YouTube by someone called Clueless Engineer. So he's got a whole series of them. You put several videos up on YouTube on how to use the emulator, how to use some of the, load and use some of the games that are available. I need to watch the one on Space Invaders, I guess. You've got some other videos about the new brain as well on YouTube.
I'm not a lot of video making.
Not big into that? Yeah. It takes time. And I found a video on something called the New Brain Robot Car on YouTube, which was interesting, on using a new brain and they actually have a new brain connected to or sitting on top of a car. Yeah, a little car that you can control.
That's from the same guy, I think, that made the USB, the SD card machine, the add-on.
So are there any other references or any other websites that you're aware of that were not mentioned here?
I think there is one in England that collects old information, something like the archive of this. It archives all the old stuff. I don't have the address available at this time, but I could send it to you if you want to look at it.
please do. If you have any other references or any other sites that would be good to include, please send those to me and I'll include them in the show notes. I couldn't find any others through various, through a lot of searching. So
yes, I don't know, not very much on this machine.
But again, place to start is your site, and I think if someone who wants to learn more about the machine, that's probably the first place to go. You've got the most information of any site out there. So
I do my best.
I think we all appreciate it. So that's really about it. That's all the topics that I wanted to talk about. Anything else that you want to say to the listeners or add before we sign off here?
Just never forget the old machines that started all this. If you're young, you probably don't know how it was in the 80s. Nobody had a computer at their house. The computers were not connected. There were no mouses, no graphics. Everything was text. I think it's a very good thing to look to that era just for information purposes, to see how far we went in 30 years.
It has come a long way. Yeah. No, that's great. Okay, excellent. I appreciate that.
To do any of this is my first time. And you should know I am not so good in English.
Your English was great. No problem at all.
Thank you, but I usually write stuff and read stuff, and I don't have someone to talk to, so I could develop my language skills.
No issues. I understood you just fine, and I think your English is certainly better than my Greek is. So.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. Feel free to send me any links if you have any other links, that I should include in the show notes. And
yes. Send you the link to the site I told you about, and the link to the demo. I think the demo is in the emulator, but I'll see if maybe I do a video about it.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. See you later.
Bye.
Okay, that's it for Floppy Days for this month. I want to give special thanks to Chris Despoinidis for taking the time to co-host this podcast with me. He was just a virtual Pandora's box of information, really added value to this particular podcast. I provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during this podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. I encourage you always to provide feedback for the show. You can do that at Apple Podcasts or on the website, via email at floppydays@gmail.com, via Twitter at floppydays, on Mastodon at floppydays@oldbytes.space, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays, or on the Discord server whose link is at floppydays.com. Floppy Days is also available for streaming at TuneIn, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Stitcher.com, and Spotify. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye!